Good evening, everyone. And we are now in Isaiah chapter 5. Isaiah chapter 5. Now, Isaiah chapter 5 is something quite different from what we have done in the book of Isaiah, as well as compared to all the other prophet books that we have done in the past. The reason being is that today we are looking at a parable instead of imagery that's presented in little chunks. This would be a story that Isaiah is presenting, and it's trying to portray a story between God and the nation of Israel. And in this case, you'll find that it is both the house of Israel as well as Judah. Now, as I had mentioned up front when we first started the book of Isaiah, you would invariably see that the book of Isaiah is not laid up in a chronological order, which is why that if you had read the book of Isaiah by yourself, you may come across, I suppose, challenges to actually understand the book of Isaiah, because it doesn't seem to be in a sequence of a chronology. It doesn't start at the beginning. It starts somewhere towards the later part of Hezekiah's reign. And then it goes on, and now we are in chapter 5. It's now bringing us back forward a little bit. And so I want to point out to you that chapter 5 doesn't appear to be the next chapter of chapter 4, but it nevertheless is an important chapter to describe the situation where the house of Israel is still around, which appears to me, at least, that it is before Hezekiah's reign, very likely. But nevertheless, let us look at this from a parable standpoint. Now, it's a fairly long parable of 30 verses. I'm thinking as we go along, I'm inclined to split it up into 2 days so that we can have the second part tomorrow. And then we will prepare ourselves for chapter 6. So let me just give you a heads up on chapter 6 that you should also read ahead of time, because chapter 6 essentially tells us the beginning of Isaiah's prophethood, if you could call it that way, his call to be a prophet. And that would be the next chapter. But we need to clear this chapter today, if not tomorrow, so that we can actually have a clear view of chapter 6 and save some time on that. Now, chapter 5, again, I want to mention to you, it is a song, a poetry. It is something that he sings. Now, whatever you may say, this is a song, right? He sings a song. It's a shir. And it's similar to our Malay word, which is adopted from the Arabic, sha'ir. This is shir. And it's written this way, Shiyr. Shir, right? Shir is a song. So let me sing a song. Sing is also shir, right? Song is also shir. And shir or shur. But basically, they are both the same root, right? A song is a shirah, right? A shirah. This would be a shirah. Which comes from the same root. So the interesting thing about Hebrew that I could actually give you a little peek is this. Much of the Hebrew words are derived from verbs, which means this. if generally most nouns are derived from verbs. So in this case, you could see sing is the base word, and song is the noun that is derived from the action of singing. So a shir is to sing, and a shira is a song. And in most cases, I won't say all, but in most cases, nouns are derived from verbs. It is the classification or the result of the action. So now let me sing to my well-beloved, one who is beloved, one who is well-loved, right? And this is a good translation. Uh, and this one here is not a good translation. It is not to sing to my well-beloved, it is to sing for my well-beloved. What would be the difference is this. In today's environment, when you sing, it is singing to, how would you say? When you sing, it is to a person. So in a love song, you sing to your loved one. In this particular case, Isaiah is singing for my loved one. So the whole picture here is to sing for the loved one, a song of my beloved. And the word beloved here, or beloved one, one who is beloved. One who is beloved. So well-loved and beloved all comes from the same. So, but this is an interesting word. This is dod, right? Dod. I guess there is a name that comes to mind. Dodi Al-Fayed, Princess Diana's, I don't know what you call that, related to Princess Diana in her private life. Dod is to be loved, right? To be loved as a lover or as a friend. And so this is a song of a lover. And it's about his vineyard. And that's a very strange love song. It's about a vineyard, a kerem. A kerem is it's like a garden of grapes. Okay. So this would be a garden of grapes. And this is important because grapes is a very major crop in the life of Israel. And so let's look at this. And the song as he sings is a poetry, but also a parable, because he's telling a story. So a parable is a story. And this story is in the form of a poetry, in the form of a song. Now, whether Isaiah actually had musical notes and sang it out, I really don't know. Maybe he did, but we are not going to sing it here. But the idea here is we need to remember that it is a parable that is in the form of a song that Isaiah is singing. So a parable is a story. A song is a poetry. And the singing is the way it's presented. What is so unique about a parable that is a song is that it would be in words that creates imagery from the choice of words, the rhyme and the rhythm. Now, unfortunately, because we are looking at the translation, we will not be able to appreciate the poetry part, but at least the imagery part would be something we can actually pay attention to. So my well-beloved have a vineyard, and it is actually on a very fruitful hill. Now, it is said to be a horn, right? A fruitful hill. is said to be a horn of the son of oil. Now, let me just give you the words first. It is on a horn of a son of oil or fat. Now, again, in the literal sense, you should begin to see that the literalness of the Hebrew language is not reflected in the English because it is very difficult to translate a song or a poetry into its equivalent Hebrew rhythm in the English language, because the English language would sound really weird, right? Really awkward. But I want to give you the literal meaning so that you can appreciate how difficult it is to translate from Hebrew to English, especially in poetry. But more importantly is for you to appreciate the literalness of the song, a horn of a son of oil. And basically the whole idea is on the fact it is a very fertile ground. That's the picture. So my well-beloved has a vineyard on a very fruitful hill. Now the word fruitful, unfortunately, in the English has no meaning any closer to the original. The original really tells us that my well-beloved has a vineyard that is planted on a horn, a mound, right? Of a son of oil, where the land is fat, fat of oil, and meaning it's very fertile. Verse 2, he dug it up and cleared out its stones, and he planted it with the choicest vines, the best of grapes. Now, obviously, my well-beloved who has a vineyard, and this is a representation or a symbolism of God, right? So God is planting a vineyard, and obviously he would prepare his ground. So he dug it out, he cleared out the stones, he planted it, and if you are the best of the vineyard, you would actually plant the best of grapes. And that's what he did. He built a tower in its midst, a migdal, in the middle. So if this was the plantation, right in the middle, there's a big tower. And that is the migdal. The tower is to store grapes, right? He would even make a wine press. This would be a pit, okay? He would hew a pit in it. Now, the Hebrew word hew a pit, and we have the equivalent made a wine press, doesn't sound to be alike, but they are very similar. In the way that they actually make a wine press. Now, I'm sure that we look at wine press in the French way or in the Australian way, where they've got a big humanly mega bucket with lots of grapes, and people will be stepping on the grapes inside that bucket. Well, in Israel, they don't use that kind of a concept. So what they do is that they have stone terraces. And the importance of a stone terrace is that the water, the liquid, doesn't soak into the ground. And so they would hew out of the stone a pit. And in that pit is where they would put the grapes, and they would actually carve a drain that goes into a collection cistern. And that is how wine presses are made. So they don't call it a wine press. They call it a pit because literally it's a hole in the rock, and it would then they would put grapes into it. So let me try to imagine it this way, right? and they would dig a hole, and in the hole they would actually have drains, and it would go into another bigger hole. And this would be a cistern, and it would collect. And so what they would find is that these would be the grapes. The grapes would be here, and the people will be standing up here, stepping on it. And the reason why it's hewn is because these are rocks. And so whatever they press or step on, it would not flow into the ground, and it collects into a bigger hole next to it, where they will then do whatever they do to make wine. And so it is said that he expected it to bring forth good grapes. And notice the word good does not appear in the original. And in the New King James and in some of your Bibles, it will be represented in italics. It is provided by the translators to give you a description of what grapes. I think it is a good suggestion. It's just that it's not in the original text. So it is expected to bring forth grapes. Obviously, when you plant grapes, or you plant the best of grapes, you expect to bring forth good grapes. So it's by inference. But the translators have decided to help us and give us the word. But it brought forth wild grapes. Unfortunately, this is not wild grapes. This is bushim. Bushim would give us, well, I would say this would be poison berries. And this is a contrast. The contrast is between choice vines and wild grapes. This would be bad grapes. It would be stinking berries. And that would be the picture that is now given, that instead of the best of grapes that they have planted, it came forth, or the fruits that came out were bad. They were rotten. Now that's the picture of the song, or the parable, the story in a song. Verse 3, and now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem, men of Judah, and this will immediately tell you the southern kingdom. Judge, please, between me and my vineyard. Well, the word judge is literally to comment, right? To comment. To tell me, to critique. Tell me what happened. Give me your opinion between me and my vineyard. Now, I want you to see that this is serious words. And essentially, as God speaks through Isaiah, it is to, I guess, it is to wake them up. These are words that God is using different ways to prod Judah, to wake up to what's happening. And he says, what more could have been done to my vineyard that I have not done in it? Let me just finish this. Why then, when I expected it to bring forth good grapes, did it bring forth wild grapes or stinking poison berries? Now, this is a contrast. As you can see, this is different. This is A and A prime. Okay. Instead of A and B, they're saying the same thing twice. This would be a contrast because it gives good grapes versus wild grapes. And the question that God is asking here is, Judah, I have given you this story. Tell me, what more could I have done that you can see that I didn't do? this is the question. This is a wake up question. Verse 5. Now, tell me what I will do to my vineyard. Basically is again asking Judah, if I have planted a great vineyard, did everything and in the choices of land, the most fertile land, did everything to make sure that the grapes can grow, and I have picked the best of the grapes, and then it came out wild grapes. What more could I have done? But this is even more telling. In verse 5, let me tell you what I will do if that is happening. And this is the shocker. Basically, God is telling Judah, this is what I'm going to do. I will take away its hedge and it shall be burned. I will break down its wall and it shall be trampled down. Now, this is an A and a B. Hedge is a wall. Verse 5, when it talks about a hedge, this would be Masuka. So in the Garden of Eden, let me just use the example. In the Garden of Eden, is somewhat square, and around it, all this is not a fence. Well, you can call it a fence of hedges. And this is what God is saying, that He is going to take away the hedge, remove it so there is no more protection, and it shall be burned. And this is literally burn, right? Ba'ar is to burn it up. I will break down its wall. Notice the wall is the protection, and it shall be trampled down. Trampled would mean that you are stepping on it. So basically, the idea of burn and trample means it will be destroyed. The vineyard will be destroyed. The protection of the vineyard will be gone. All right, that's verse 5. Verse 6, I will lay it in waste. Basically, I'm going to put it there and fix it there in its place, the vineyard. I'm not going to touch it. And what's going to happen is it will be in, well, the word waste, let's see. It's a seldom used word. This word waste would certainly be destroyed. Or you could call it desolate, in a sense that it is in ruins. We have seen many of these words in the past, but that's what God is saying. I'm going to take the vineyard. I'm going to take away the protection. I'm going to step on it. I'm going to destroy it, basically. Let it be destroyed. And here in verse 6, God explains, I will not prune it. Prune means to cut it. I will not dig around it. And in this case, to help the ground become more fertile, I will not cut it clean. Now, if you're not familiar with planting grapes, I think it's something that we should spend some time to think about. Grapes is a very, how should I say, it's a very different tree. And it has a trunk. It grows out from the ground, and it has long branches, right? Long branches. And the long branches usually is mounted on what we call wires. And this would be a stick. And what essentially would happen is that the vine will grow along the branches. Okay, this is just to show you how it looks like. But the important thing is this: the longer the branches, the worse the branch will be, because it would take a longer route for nutrients to come from the ground to the branch to bear fruits. So basically, when it says prune, what prune actually means is to cut. So it will be cut short. It will not be left long. And while that is the case, then over time you would find fruits. And the fruits will come out from the branch. Okay? And if a grape tree or a vine is not pruned or is not dug, meaning I don't fix the ground and the ground will be full of weeds, the water doesn't flow, and there should come out briars and thorns, and this will be thorn bushes, and now this will be weeds in our case, right? I will also command the clouds that they rain, no rain on it. And that's bad because no water coming down, no water in the ground, and all the briars and thorns are all around, and it's not dug in the ground and it's not pruned. Actually, this means that it is left alone to die. That's the picture in verse 6. Now, verse 7 tells us the symbolism. The vineyard of the Lord of hosts is a house of Israel. That's the northern kingdom. The men of Judah are his pleasant plants. Now, in this case, the pleasant plants would be the plant of delight. What we have seen is the house of Israel at this point in time is, I would think, based on this symbolism, is that it is trampled down. The protection, the hedge has been removed. And perhaps the Assyrians have come in. They have trampled on the land, and the house of Israel is destroyed. Now, the plants themselves are valuable to God, and God considers the men of Judah as his pleasant plant, meaning there is meaning to keep Judah. There is meaning to keep Judah. And so God is looking for mishpat. Mishpat is justice, and behold, he has seen oppression. This would actually, I would think, how would you say? This is not a right way of translating it. It is not oppression for righteousness, and this shouldn't be there. So let me just give you a retranslation. Instead of oppression for righteousness, it literally means a deviation to righteousness. A deviation to righteousness. What's deviation? In this case, it would be, how should we say? It would be detach, right? Detach. A detachment of righteousness. I think by the word itself for oppression, they are talking about violence as well, right? But more importantly, with regards to to righteousness here, which is tzedakah. Now, the picture here would be very much Hamas. Hamas would be injustice and violence. And so what is God saying is this: God is looking for justice. But behold, look and see, he only finds deviation of tzedakah. They pretend to do tzedakah, but it's not. They impose violence and injustice towards the people. And behold, and the last one is a cry. This is an outcry. Outcry. And it is for help. It is an outcry of distress. Because the men of Judah are oppressing, are committing violence, committing injustice against the common folk of Judah. Now, this part here very much reiterates the fact that while the house of Israel is the vineyard that God has removed the boundaries, removed the hedges, removed the walls, and they are destroyed, but the plants, the plants that God wants is the men of Judah, and is looking to see whether it is the good grapes. But when he looked at it, well, these words here that you could see, oppression, or deviation to righteousness, and a cry of distress, becomes what we saw as stinking and poison berries. And that would be the symbolism that came from the parable. In verse 8, verse 8 is an interjection. In our equivalent terms, it would be like ayah, right? That's our equivalent terms. I think in the Hebrew word, it's hoy. If you have seen or watched the Fiddler on the Roof, you could get a picture. And the Jewish people love to say hoy. And that would be our equivalent of ayah, right? And it says hoy to those who goes from house to house. They add field to field till there is no place. They build more and more places, and they have more and more fields where they may dwell alone in the midst of the land. One of the picture here is this, the word join. You have two ideas here. One is to touch, and the other is to strike. This word is naga. So I think I've expressed it not as accurately as I want to. Those who strike house to house, and then this is not quite the word adding. They actually, it's not to add. They also strike field to field until there is finality. There is no more. The end of the strikes, and they will be alone in the land, right? They will be alone in the land, which means that this will be destruction, and there will be nothing left, and they are now dwelling alone in the land. In my hearing, the Lord of hosts said, this is Isaiah speaking. In my hearing, the word hearing is not Shamar, it's not Shamar, it is ozone, and that would be in my ear, the Lord said, right? It says, truly, many houses will be subjected to desolation, to waste. What kind? The great and beautiful ones, and nobody will be living in there. For 10 acres of vineyard shall yield 1 bath, a homer of seed shall yield 1 ephah. Now these are all ancient weights and volumes. A bath is a volume, ephah is a volume, it is a volume for dry, bath is a volume for wet. But basically the picture that is defined here is this. From such a vast vineyard, the results will be very meager. That's what it means right here. That would be the end result. Verse 11. Then again, boy, to those who rise early in the morning. And when they rise early in the morning, the intoxicating drink, the strong drink will chase them from behind. And it will continue until night. And the wine will be set ablaze. And what picture does it give you? It gives you that these people, when they wake up, they are intoxicated. When they sleep, they are intoxicated to a point where the spirit will be set on fire. They would have so much alcohol in them. Verse 12. The zither and the harp, both of these would be stringed instruments. Please don't think of these words as modern instruments. These are, I guess we could call it equivalent modern instrument, but they are not exactly how we can imagine them to be like. And then tambourine and flute. This is wind, and tambourine is to shake, right? And wine is in their feast. By the way, the word feast or banquet actually comes from the word to drink. And so wine is in their banquet or feast. This is a big atmosphere, and in an Oriental culture, we say eat, but in their celebration, it's to drink. And so that is the picture of a banquet. And when they celebrate, they do not regard the work of the Lord, nor consider the operation of his hands. Now we have this, an A and a B again. So look at this. They do not regard. Regard would be navat, would be to look at, right? They do not look at the doings, what God is doing. And then neither do they consider. And the word consider is to see. Now, I know these words may sound alike in English, but they are two different Hebrew words. They do not see the ma'aseh would be the deed. It is also the labor of his hands. And so you have two lines, A and B. basically, they ignore God. They celebrate as if God does not exist. Now, from verse 13 onwards, we would get the corresponding result of whatever happened on top of verses 1 to 12. From here on, all the way, these are the outcomes, the result, or the consequence. And that's from verse 13 all the way to the second half of this chapter. So in verse 13, and we'll just do 13, 14, and 15, and then we will wrap up for today. Therefore, my people would be people of Judah. They have gone into captivity. My people, in this case, that would be the northern kingdom. At this point in time, they have gone into captivity. This would be the northern. Because they have no knowledge. Their honorable men are famished, and their multitude dried up with thirst. Again, this is an A and a B. First of all, no knowledge is important. They are without knowledge. And here, knowledge is da'at, and this would be knowledge of God, of his instructions. I think it would be important for us to realize in verse 13 why this has happened. And this is also repeated in the book of Hosea, right? My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge because they have no knowledge. And I think based on this, the A and B tells us they are honorable men, the men with honor, men with honor. Their multitude are famished, they will hunger. Their multitude, their crowd, they have dried up. Now, the word dried up is parched, literally dried up. And when you're dried up, you want water and thirst. So one is hungry, one is thirsty, and this is a picture of having, I guess, having serious needs. But this is where I want us to look at before we close. I think we could end with verse 13. Because I want to spend just a few minutes to describe this. No knowledge. My people have gone into captivity because they have no knowledge. They have no knowledge of God. Not that they never had, but they forgot God. They forgot what God had wanted them to do. Now, through the kings from Jeroboam all the way to Hosea, they have done badly. They have set up Baals. They have set up idols. They have gone into injustice. They have worshipped the golden calves. And based on that kind of a behavior, Isaiah is now told that these people really do not think about God anymore. They don't think about his words anymore. See, the Torah is the instructions and directions for living, and they have completely ignored that, and they have oppressed the weak, the poor, and the needy. And God is sending them out to be seriously lacking They think they have done well by ignoring God. God has come to a point in time where he has removed the walls and the hedges of the vineyard. And the northern people, which is the house of Israel, have gone into captivity. Now, from verse 13 onwards, it also addresses the southern kingdom, which has not yet been taken into captivity by the Babylonians. But these are constant warnings from verse 13 onwards. And I would want to save the rest of it by finishing it tomorrow. And I hope that you could get some time to reflect on chapter 5, verses 1 to 13, to see a slight difference in how God approached warning Judah and using the house of Israel as an example. Unfortunately, long story short, you find that Judah also never heard God. But in chapter 5, it really gives us a picture of how patient God is. That he appeals to them. He wants them to understand in gentle ways and then severe ways and then by serious warnings. And yet, this is what we're getting. So we are getting the picture of how God is entreating his people. And with that, we will come to a close of today until verse 13.